So thanks everybody for joining in. We're here to talk about the bridge, both import and export, lots of best practices. I'm particularly excited about this presentation because it's actually a continuation of a 4-part webinar series that I've been giving the last 3 months. So this is the final session. We've been following data from the point of capture through verification, validation, storing in PCS, reporting, and now we're going to finish it up with the bridge. So integrating that data with these other data sets or work order management systems or GIS. So just a quick agenda. I'm going to run through a recap of the first 3 sessions just so everyone is on the same page of what we've been talking about. We're going to go over some bridge basics and then dig right into a ton of best practices for bridge imports, exports, automation. We'll wrap up with some use cases that you guys can take home and apply in your environments. So the first session, which for the record, all of the recordings of the previous 3 sessions are on our YouTube channel. We're pushing a lot of content onto our YouTube channel as much as possible, so be sure to check those out. Be sure to check your inbox for notes from Leslie and Anna on our marketing team about when these webinars are going to be scheduled. We're not only doing them on software, we're doing them on hardware, we're doing them on the AC mitigation stuff that Clay is talking about right now. So stay tuned for that and keep checking it. Lon Duke, seen here in his natural habitat, was my co-panelist for the first presentation. He went over some tips for doing accurate close interval surveys every time. So some pre-assessment items like what type of pipe is it, what's the coding, or do I have all my current sources interruptible, do I need to do interruption, when was it installed, has there ever been a problem, lots of things that you should know before you get out and do a close interval survey so you're equipped to handle anything that comes at you. He went through some best practices as well over how to set up your Allegro, including some tips on how to stop your survey wire from breaking, highlighted some lesser known but critically important features, and went over best practices for troubleshooting your survey while you're in the field. In the second session, we taught you how to import those close interval surveys that he gathered into Survey Manager with the Allegro file formats or flat CSV files. We went through some of the secret sauce that Survey Manager brings to the table by automatically lining up these day plots based on GPS and quickly highlighting issues like unedited skips so that they can be corrected before you commit it to your database record. Lots of tools in Survey Manager around finding spikes, looking for exceptions, and lots of tools in Survey Manager to quickly rectify those problems, really common problems that you see when gathering close interval surveys specifically. And of course, you know, any of the changes that we make in Survey Manager, we have an audit log, so it's not like someone can change something and it's just gone forever, what the original value was. We're tracking all that for you, just like we do in PCS. In the third session, I went over reports in Survey Manager and in PCS, specifically overlaying surveys in SnapView and running reports on those. So those of you that are familiar with it, we have a really neat looking report called the chart PDF, and it looks kind of like this. It takes your chart across the top and the map across the bottom in definable sections, so you can do 1,000-foot sections, and it automatically parses those files and lines your chart and your map up. So you could imagine, I don't know if anyone here has ever done that, a lot of survey companies do it, but you can imagine how much time it would take to narrow down to those 1,000-foot sections on a chart and then narrow down to it on a map and make sure it's all lined up with your comments, with your waveforms. All you have to do is click a button in Survey Manager. We went over some of the exception reports, which for those of you that don't know, we're including your starting and ending lat long on your exceptions for these close interval surveys. So you know exactly where to go to start to find these problems or do your side drains or whatever follow-up surveys that you're going to do. And then we took it a step further and did something that I think probably everyone in this room has asked for at least one point. We used the comments and objects reports to extract test station data, specifically dipole data from a close interval survey, and import that into PCS to calculate 100 millivolt shift. I see your jaw open there a little bit, Chris. So we have a report that parses these comments, including test stations, and you can extract your potential readings that you got on a close interval survey and bridge it into PCS to, and in this case, we calculated 100 millivolt shift. So that's all in the third session. If you want to take a look at it, it's on our YouTube channel. And then we went over exception reports in PCS. So now what's next? We gathered our data. It's been verified. It's been corrected. We collaborated between the field and the office. We collaborated with subject matter experts that look at these surveys all the time. The data has been stored in our database of record. It's safe. We ran our annual reports. Now, what are we going to do? Of course, the next logical step is to get that data out. You know, these days we're asked more and more to share our data with other data sets to get a better idea of, you know, the health of our pipeline. We're not the only group that are gathering readings at a pipeline, and so our data is super critical to that. We're going to kind of dig through on the PCS side, really just through the bridge, which is our tool that we use to integrate all of your CP and close interval survey and atmospheric and valve and custom facility type data with other systems. So I know a lot of people in the room here are familiar with the bridge, so I didn't want to take this the approach of just walking through the bridge basics. I really wanted to give you some best practices. I think I've done a lot of data projects for a lot of people in this room, and a former life that I had at American Innovations as a TSE, which is now a compliance data specialist. So I spent a lot of my time crunching numbers and spreadsheets and working with the bridge to import y'all's data sets in. So I'm going to leverage that in this presentation. But for those of you that aren't aware, just want a refresher, the bridge is a mass import and export tool. So we're taking large data sets and we are importing them to our database for a variety of reasons. It could be that you acquired a company. It could be that you have some historical data that you want imported. It could be that you have another data set that historically had been tracked outside of PCS and you want to start storing that in PCS. You could build each individual facility one at a time and every record one at a time. The bridge is going to save you so much time if you know how to do it. It's a super powerful tool, and you can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing with the bridge. I think we've probably all been in a case where we ran a bridge and it went terribly, and now you have a bunch of duplicates that you have to clean up, and we're gonna talk about ways to mitigate that. It comes in 3 flavors. We have a bridge import, we have a bridge export, and we have a bullhorn bridge. We're going to talk about the first 2 in this presentation because the bullhorn bridge is really automatic. We're pinging your bullhorn directly from the website and pulling those readings in if they're aligned. Nothing real fancy about it other than it's automated. The real place where you can screw up is when you're talking about importing and exporting files. And of course, it's fully automatable. I tried to talk about that yesterday during my presentation at the beginning of the day, but we ran out of time, so I went through it really fast. So I pulled those slides and added them to this presentation so we can spend a little more time on that. That's one of the new features that we have in 1.14. Okay, so still staying pretty basic. The file format is super critical. We're talking bridge imports, and the way that you're going to get that data in is through flat files. It's going to be Excel files, CSV, or text. No duplicates in the data. You need to make sure that all of your Intel key fields are matching. That's what we always at AI always call row code. Y'all call it a million other things, segment code, valve section code. It's the same thing. What pipe is it? What is the unique code for that pipe? And then what's the milepost? There's some nuance there depending on the facility type. I have a handy slide for a reference so that once y'all get this presentation, you can print it off if you want a quick reference guide of what the Intel keys are for different facility types. There shouldn't be any duplicates in the data. The bridge is gonna do a pretty decent job about preventing that from happening, but you need to be aware of duplicates because the data could be wrong. We have lots of tools through the Allegro, through PCS, that help keep all of your inspections unique, your maintenance items unique, any new facilities unique. But when we're talking about integrating with other systems, I have no idea if they have those same rules in place. So what could be a duplicate to PCS may not really be a duplicate in the other system. So it's something to be aware of, and we're going to talk more about that. You can't have any duplicates in your column headers as well. So I guess if we take a step back, when we're talking flat files, it's going to be the very first row of your file is what column all of the data below it pertains to. And then you have rows and rows and rows and rows of data, hundreds of thousands of rows, millions of rows sometimes. Well, not much more than a million because the cap on Excel is not much more than a million. But you can't have any duplicate column headers because then PCS doesn't know which field to map those columns to. And then you can't have any gaps. If you have any gaps, it'll just grab everything before the gap and bring it in. Pretty basic stuff. But I have, actually, we were joking earlier about giving out tokens. So I have a bunch of opportunities for y'all to get tokens. And this is the first opportunity is I mentioned that you can import using a text file, which sounds super archaic, right? But why would you want to do that? Does anyone know? Do what? Yeah, so no restriction on the length of a field. So that could be a problem where text comes into play. That's not what I was thinking of, though. I was thinking of something else, but that's good. Format, that's it. So format is a problem in Excel. It tries to be really helpful, but sometimes it kind of misses the mark. You know, when you have a string of numbers, when I say string, I mean like it's text and they're only numbers, it converts it to scientific notation. So you're not bothered by, you know, having 20 numbers. Well, that breaks a lot of the links that we have in PCS. So having a text file, it doesn't convert it to scientific notation. We also see it a lot, you know, as we're integrating with other systems, we use all these weird codes, right? So like in our demo data, we have T1400, and that's the unique name for a pipe segment. But, you know, as a technician, I'm going to call it Austin to Dallas, like what it is or where it's located, or Longhorn to, or whatever it is. So those codes are really there to help keep everything in sync. So the data that's in PCS can map back to these other systems because they're critically important. You have to have these keys between these databases in order to move data back and forth. Well, if your code kind of looks like a date, like NOV09, Excel will convert that to November 9th or November 2009 because it thinks you're trying to put in a date. And that breaks your bridge. So two things to be aware of, probably edge cases. Sounds like Rob's run into them. Yes, trailing zeros, yeah, it chops them out. And it's a pain, you know, because in Excel, you can format the cell to text, but if you click on it, it just reverts it back to general and you lose those trailing zeros. You have to like not even breathe on the file or it's going to change the format. So some stuff to be aware of. All right. This is a shame-free room right now. So this is your opportunity to get some coins. I think likely everyone who has used the bridge is probably going to get coins for every single one of these. So has anyone ever accidentally created thousands of facilities? Uriel's got his hand up. I know I have. Tony has. Yeah, me too. Have you ever created thousands of row codes? Those are trickier. They're harder to clean up. Anyone ever seen new region in their hierarchy? Yeah. I need more hands. Yeah. And yeah. And we're just going to wait for a little bit on this last one. Right? Yeah, lots of admin in the room. Probably want to mitigate that. Anyone ever waited for a bridge to process only to realize that some of the data didn't come through? file was empty. Yeah. I think if you have used the bridge, you've run into all 4 of these things, and it's kind of crazy. You know, you had a question, Lee?
Not that I've done any of these. If you have something like that, you can't just say, I want to clear all of these out. Who would we talk to at AI about deleting out thousands of these? Who would we talk to?
So it depends. That's a quick way, an easy way to do it. For those of you joining online, the question was, if this happens, how do we clean it up? What's the best way to do it? Who do we talk to at AI to clean it up? So if you have facilities that are duplicated, that's an easy one. You could use a separate bridge to move them to a different row code, like a placeholder row code, and then delete the row code, and that deletes everything underneath it. That's a really quick way to do it. You could also, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but you can also move inspections and maintenance in 2.0 with facility key bridging. That's something that we didn't have before. So if you create thousands of inspections or maintenance, you can mass move those to a test point, mass delete them. What you can't do is mass delete row codes. Those are individual. So that's where you probably want to talk to Tony, and we can help you out with the credit card. Yep. I'm not actually going to talk about that at all, but if y'all aren't familiar with that, it's a different way to mass move data within the UI. So it essentially gives you navigate to where it lives, and you navigate to where it should be, and you hit a move button, and you say OK, and it's done. You don't have to worry about the bridge. Go ahead, Ray.
Can you take PCS Axis out of server mode, if you will? I can see if you're going to upload some of this stuff, you could talk to your DBA data snapshot prior to doing a rollback point. But how do you keep others from playing in the database while you're experimenting with your first load of 1,000 facilities?
So the way it's typically done is with test environments. So, and that's one of the best practices that I'm gonna talk about.
Sure, but in a production environment, can you prevent others from logging in, or would you change other users to what's the high level? How would you do that? Would you change everyone's
security? Yeah, I mean you would just restrict their access. General user isn't going to need, especially in Axis, they don't need access to the bridge. Your bullhorn bridges are automated. That in version 7, that they weren't automated, right? So they would need to go hit that bullhorn interface button. You don't have that problem anymore. Really, admin should be the only ones that are running bridge because they can create these problems. Yeah, admin should be the only one who have access to a bridge. Yep. Yeah. So I've done that too. So that's a good one for having that. So first, just to repeat the question for everybody online, when you have a close interval survey, the start date is one of the intel keys, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Well, in the bottom right corner of your cell, when you're manually populating that, there's a little black square box. You double click it, and if you're not paying attention, that date increments by a day for 100,000 records or however many records are in the survey. So when you import it, because it's an intel key for the survey, now I have 100,000 surveys that I accidentally imported that Tony has to clean up. That's another one that we can't do a good job cleaning up. Preview? This one? Yes, this is your first line of defense, bridge preview. Absolutely. It's gonna mitigate against creating lots of these duplicates across the board, row codes, individual facilities, duplicate inspections, maintenance, CI survey folders. It's a way for you to verify your data before you're committing it to PCS. And I think it's counterintuitive because it's an additional step, right? There are 2 buttons. One says preview, one says import. Import doesn't run the preview. It just imports it as is. It's faster because you don't have the other step. But preview is going to save you time because you don't have to go back and clean these problems up, especially in a compliance world where this stuff is critical. The integrity of our databases are so critical. It's wiser to take the extra time to resharpen your axe, if you will, and make sure the data is going to go to the right spot. That's right. So some things about preview. Pay attention to the colors. Across the top of the bridge preview window, you're going to see a bunch of different colors. And we have the number of records that fall into these types. So everyone wants to see green for everything, right? No? That's right, yeah. I think in the CP world, the answer is it always depends, I know that's the answer that Clay always gives when y'all ask him questions about how something should be designed. It's the same thing with the bridge. The answer is it depends. It depends on the type of bridge you're running. If you're trying to create new records, green is good. If you're not, green is very bad. Those are duplicates. So be aware of the data that you are importing and what your end goal is to know when new is good or new is bad. Rejected generally is not a great thing. It means that something is misaligned. We'll see that here when we talk about facility key bridging, which is another tool in your tool belt to help you link these data sets to other systems. That kind of thing is usually, in my experience, either it's a problem with the data. And so you can defer the bridge, we'll talk about that here in a second, and go fix your data and run it again. Redundant is duplicate. So what that means is the rows in your Excel spreadsheet are duplicated based on the Intel keys, those row code, milepost, inspection date. So when you see something like that and you know that it should not be duplicated, that's where you should go in and pop open that Excel file again and take a look at that data more clearly. Warnings are not always bad. And we'll skip over reformatted. Reformatted just changes pretty much like the case of the, well, I guess if it's all uppercase, it'll do camel case or remove some spaces. It's not really anything you should be worried about. Just let it do its thing.
So at that point, is there any plan to say I have a other bridge and that's one next to the crap. I don't want to bring in just a big deal. There way to then plan to edit that bridge.
There can be. I'll show you a different way to do it, but it's not like, you know how in Field Computer Send, how you can go and manually select the rows that you want to be sent to a DAT file. We don't have a feature like that, but we can. There's no reason that's stopping us from doing that if that would be valuable for y'all.
Yeah, there was early talks in some of that. I remember back in 7 about some of that information. The theory on a lot of that is the same as why the PCS viewer is read-only. Is as soon as you modify a table, in a sense, you're not modifying the original. So if you modify, you go back, fix whatever you need to fix, and then you push that in. There's no record really in the original of it being modified, and it could easily be used elsewhere, and it could be incorrect at that point. So the thought process is on data management is you always want to go back to the original if you ever need to change anything, and then just go and issue it again. So that's kind of where we were back in the days when we were designing that, but it doesn't necessarily mean we couldn't revisit that.
Yeah, change tracking has come a long way since then, probably as well. So we can hook that up to these temp tables as well. I don't think that would be a problem from a technical standpoint. Sure. Yep. I was always really anal about my bridges, and I would run previews, cancel, run another preview, cancel, or defer, always checking the source file to make sure that it was perfectly good before I imported it. I know that there's logic baked into PCS that does a lot of this stuff for you. For example, and this may be a little bit overboard, but when I would add inspection records, new facilities with inspection records, you could just import the facility inspection bridge, and it's going to build your facilities, It's going to check your activates and import your inspections. Well, I would break that down into each of its components. I build the hierarchy, build the row codes, build the information records with the activates, and then build the inspections. It takes a lot longer, but when you get to the end of it, it's a safer way to approach it. Anyway, back on track. In the bridge preview, there is a warning section. There's also a rejection section. At the far right of that window, you're going to see if something is showing up as a warning, why it was a warning. These warnings sometimes are not bad. Sometimes they require further evaluation. So there's 3 of them here. The first one says an input value for casing status of electrolytic short was not found in the pick list. That's one of the bad ones. That means your data is not going to go in because the pick list that it's trying to match to doesn't have a matching value. Definitely something to look out for. The other 2 are not as bad. They're criteria checks. The data is still going to come in. It's just saying, hey, you have a problem here. You may already know you have a problem, but we're telling you just to be safe. That's right. Yep. Right. And you could imagine, you know, the reason we have pick lists, right, is to stop all these million permutations of the same thing. Like technician, for example, I could have David Gaucher, D Gaucher, Gaucher, Dave Gaucher, Gaucher D, all of these different permutations of the exact same thing. It makes the data really hard to query. So pick lists really help with that. And we're preventing you, maybe, probably not more so than we should. I mean, it should match up, right, across systems. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Most likely the technician field is blank, meaning that the value did not come in, but the record came in. Yeah, because it couldn't populate if it was
right.
Record stuff. But it doesn't mean that the inspection.
Know when to use the defer button. So this is one of the ones at the bottom right corner of the window. What this does is, like Tony mentioned, the bridge preview pre-processes these Excel spreadsheets or text files and loads them in as temp tables in PCS so that you can have access to this view where we're pre-validating the data. Because it's stored in this nice, safe table, you can come back to it whenever you want. So if you have problems with these warnings or duplicates that you need to go investigate further, use the defer button, go look at your source file. If the source file is right and the stuff is actually duplicated, you don't have to run the preview again. You can just load the same preview and hit the run button, and it's going to process. It's going to save you a lot of time. Right.
And I thought it just deferred everything to David.
Yeah. It'll leave it there. That's right. So it sits in your job queue as a preview available job, and you'll see a preview icon on that row that you can click. It pops the same preview window open. And you can defer it again if you want to. You can cancel it from there, or you can run it. Yes. Yeah, I think you can get there from the bridge as well in the job status tab.
That is a shortcut if you know that it's good and you want to run it.
Yep.
My biggest problem is we have a lot of technicians that bring in rectifier inspections, so we got that bridge set up, that's fine. They go in there and look at it, oh, I don't want this, they'll hit the X button. So there that thing lays up there in garbage in the job site. So I got to go.
Yep.
They don't cancel and get out, they just close it.
Yeah.
Bridge can be your best friend or your worst enemy, and that's the reason why by default users don't have it. It's admin, so it's give and take. There you go. And it's job security.
Yeah. Know when to reject data items, and do reject data items. So this comes into play when you have multiple data items in a bridge, which a data item in a bridge is a different type of record in the same bridge definition. So when I said I would split that test point inspection bridge up into row codes and test point information and test point inspections, my bridge has 3 data items. If my rows and my test point information are good, I'm going to let those process. I may still have to fix some stuff on the test point inspection side, so I can reject that individual data item, and it's going to save me time by not having to process the other 2 files on the next time I want to try and import my test point inspection bridge. And that's just by a little toggle at the top, accepted or rejected. So you just click that. The last thing that we'll talk about is, actually we're going to talk a lot more about this, but this is another super helpful tool, especially when integrating your data with other data sets. So facility key bridging lets you do lots of things. One of the things that it does is it does not create duplicates if it doesn't find a match between the file you're trying to import and PCS. It could be, it could be good because you don't want to create duplicates. It could be bad because now you have to do some work to figure out why it doesn't line up. Ultimately, err on the safe side and use facility key bridging when you can. This tool is easier to manage than your Intel keys on facilities alone. So for test points, you have row code and milepost. Depending on the record type, it's also effective date or inspection date or repair found date. So those are 3 fields, at most that you have to recognize. Well, I guess also the repair code, so 4 for maintenance items that you have to make sure are all mapped in order to map it to the correct facility and record. With facility key bridging, you're eliminating that to one individual field. It's much easier to maintain in PCS and specifically other systems. PCS was designed in a very specific way, and these other systems are probably solving different use cases. They don't really, maybe not care about a row code or a milepost. They care about the facility themselves. They care about the records themselves. That's their main focus. And so it's too much information to dump all of this superfluous information in the other system when you could just have a hook or a key between the 2 databases and bring that data in. And that's, once you have this key, that's how your systems talk to each other.
Does it require us to make our own key, or are you going to expose the width within Axis?
I'll show you here in a minute. It is a good question. I think you probably know the answer, though. So another thing that facility key bridging can do is move facilities. When you're not using facility key bridging and you want to move a facility from one milepost to another, from one row to another, because it's never going to find the match of where it's supposed to be, you're going to create a duplicate because it doesn't have a match in PCS, and so it thinks it's new and it's trying to be helpful. With facility key bridging, it says, I don't care what my row code is, what my milepost is, what my facility ID is, what the inspection date is, validate on this field, and change my row code, change my milepost to whatever is in that spreadsheet. So if you need to mass move facilities, this is the tool to use, facility key bridging.
David, on that, any idea when we might be able to do that with interval surveys?
No, we can add it. But no, I think the focus has been on facilities. We expanded it a little bit in 2.0, so we're a step further, but we didn't take it to those indirect surveys.
The use case there is, CIS coming out of the Allegro, you get your 1, 5, 10, whatever you have it set to. Well, then if you run that through GIS and you want to actually, or if you take 4 or 5 in a row that all restart at 0, and you want to rechain them all, and then I want to be able to update the tables in PCS, my only other option is to re-import them as a new survey, and then I'll have the original that came in, but then I'll have my duplicated survey, and I'll just append like station 200 or something.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's fair. It's valid. We can look at adding that in the future for sure. Okay, so what fields are available to use as your facility key bridge ID? So this is that exposed GUID. Every table in PCS has this 16-digit unique identifier. It's total gibberish, numbers and letters with dashes, but it is unique. Yeah, it keeps everything. There's like a 1 in how many million% chance? 10 million, 20 million? It's a crazy high number, percent chance that it would ever be duplicated. Essentially, it's never going to be able to be duplicated.
For those of you still on Fox or from Fox that just moved, this is what we used to call your back ID and exposed it through the UDF. That has been replaced basically with the bridge ID.
Yep. So almost there. 2 bullet points ahead. So you can also use, if you don't want to use bridge ID, for example, if 16 characters is too much to fit in the other system, you have a different key, or you want to use the other system's key to link to PCS, you can build a UDF. It's got to be a permanent information level field, a character field, and then it can be whatever you want. A couple options there. Bridge ID is the safest option because it is pulled directly from the tables and you cannot edit it at all. So definitely I would encourage that you use that. This is something that I didn't get to in my presentation yesterday, but with facility inspection and maintenance linking, we're now exposing those same GUIDs on the facility inspection and facility maintenance tables. So you can link those records back and change those Intel keys on those records as well. So you don't have to maintain the date, time, down to the timestamp, worry about the format in Excel and if it's going to change it. All you do is throw both of your GUIDs in, bridge ID, facility maintenance ID, facility inspection ID, and it knows exactly where it's supposed to go. That was a big customer request. Okay, I know we have some version 7 people in the room. Let's talk about facility key bridging in version 7 a little bit. I remember doing data projects where I wanted to use facility key bridging, and if for those of you that are familiar, in version 7 it takes you through lots of wizards, right? So it's like building this import definition takes me through 7 or 8 pages. It's a whole bunch of clicks to get where you want to go. And at the end of it, when you want to run it, and you don't have it changed to facility key, and you run your preview, you wait for your preview to load and realize facility key wasn't set up, you have to cancel it, go to this specific spot in Tools, Data Utilities, Data Options, click through this wizard, pick your facility key, but then you realize you forgot to build your facility key field. So then you go to Field and UDF Customizations, you add the field, you import that data. It's a 1,000,000-step process, and then you go through the whole bridge again. So that has been streamlined in PCS Axis. Oh, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. If you don't change it back, it won't. It'll keep using that facility key. In PCS Axis, when you build a bridge definition, we have a checkbox that says use facility key bridging. All you do is check that box. And then further on in the bridge, when you're mapping your fields, you have radio buttons that let you pick what you want your facility key to be. So there are 2 examples here. The one at the very top is for my facility. The one at the bottom is for my facility inspection records. So they're both mapped. They're both facility keys that are serving different purposes, one for facility, one for the record. It's much easier way to approach it, much fewer clicks.
If you get this far and it's grayed out, go back and check the box.
Yep.
We get a lot of calls on that.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to go through a wizard, right? It's on the same page. Part of the reason you want to use facility key bridging is because you have to remember all this stuff. So this is really a reference for y'all in case you want to use it in the future. This is just a table that breaks out the Intel key fields for different facility types. It doesn't have the inspection record facilities, or rather the inspection record Intel keys. But you don't have to remember any of this stuff if you just use facility key bridging.
What is the asterisk on facility ID?
It's a good question. So, because I've done this before, the required fields for foreign bonds are row code and milepost. If you have an RMU tied to that bond and you update the facility record and you don't have it populated, you're going to wipe out your link to that RMU. So it's a good idea to use that regardless if your bonds have RMUs. Good question. I almost forgot to mention that. Okay. Yes, no, you're absolutely right. Yep. It might actually apply to test points as well. All right, I have what I think is a tricky question. Uriel got this one, so maybe it's not that tricky. Zing. Okay, for which of the following does your current hierarchy selection matter? It only matters on one of these options. Manual, well, don't ruin it. Manual import, manual export, automated export. It's C, yeah. I was going to get everyone to raise their hands. Everyone's going to get a coin. Now you only get a coin and no one else gets coins. No, I'm just kidding. Everyone still can get a coin for that, for participating. So I think this is a common misconception about the bridge. The only time it matters is when you're exporting, what your hierarchy selection is. So when I'm importing a bridge, I don't have to go into the hierarchy and pick the row codes that I'm bridging in. It's going to map them without them being selected. Same thing for automated bridges. Actually, automated bridges are a lot more different because they don't care at all ever about what your hierarchy is looking at. If you need to filter those data sets, you have to use filters, which are on the bridge level as well. The only time it does matter is for manual exports, which functions very similarly to reports. So my export tips: know when to just use report exports instead of bridge exports. Really, the bridge is for continued use. So if you're dumping a huge data set out that you need to offload to a different server, let the job service process that so you can keep on doing your job. That's when you want to use the bridge. If you need to do it multiple times, so you're exporting data for another system on a consistent basis, that's where you want to use the bridge. If it's a one-off deal, it's a small data set, it's much fewer clicks to just run it as a report and just click the export option. You're going to get it in the same format. So definitely leverage that. When we're talking about automated bridges, if you need to filter your data set, you're going to have to filter it in two places. There's one that are for the common facilities, or rather the common fields. That's at the very top of the bridge. And then each individual data item will have their own data item specific filters. So if you're trying to bridge, you want to filter down to a specific region, and then for test points, you want to say, show me where I'm not meeting criteria. Those filters occur in multiple places. So just be aware of that. Rename your files. So this is something that we help with when we are talking about exporting data to a file and another system is going to import that. It's important to rename your file so that whenever the next bridge is run on whatever schedule it's set for, you don't lose what was in that file. Especially when we're talking about the next bullet point there. It really depends on the bridge type. So there are multiple options here. You can have a full bridge, which is everything, data inserted since last bridge, or data changed since last bridge. Kevin mentioned this yesterday with email notification, is very similar. So a full bridge takes into account everything in the database. If it's automated, it's going to do that every single time. So that's not a great option if your other system can just pull those records in and match them up with the data sets that have already been exported from PCS. Much better to just use data inserted since last export or data changed since last export. Go ahead. So kinda. It does a full regardless for your initial bridge, and then because it has to establish a baseline of what, when am I looking at these records to know what has been inserted or changed.
So
yeah.
The new inserted record plus the one that just
right. That's right.
would only have the new.
Yep.
But also think about change used on that record that you're not necessarily caring about, and it still could push that record out because it's a whole record with lots of pieces to it.
If you run it that way, you have to do it's automated. You have to do something with that data before it runs again.
No, that changed.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah. So the rename checkbox renames it looks at the folder, renames the file if it finds a matching one to the timestamp that this next bridge is running, and then it inserts the new one. So we're programmatically retaining those old files for you if you do that checkbox. That's a 2.0 change.
So if you don't click the rename because you need this other file to have the same name each time.
Or if it's to a table, bridge to table.
Bridge to table is different.
Okay, that's what I was.
Yeah, bridge table drops and creates new.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you don't do something with that data before it reruns, then you don't have your changes in between the two bridges.
Unless you rename, well, with export to table?
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
That's correct. That's also correct on export if you do not click rename.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that's an issue. I'm just saying that's something to be aware of.
Exactly.
Yeah, the thought process is that external systems will have most likely a process for in that folder, and if file ABC is there, let me pick it up and bring it over. So there's some processes that are built based off that logic, so we don't want them to rename the file. It's going to go every night, it's going to look for ABC, and it's going to pull it over. But then the other instance is that you want to retain all of those, so you're going to increment ABC1, ABC2, ABC3. So that's why you can have either workflow.
But the file, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Can you rename an export to table? Can you have an increment?
The application isn't going to rename those tables. I don't see, well,
I mean, on the SQL side, you probably
you definitely could, yeah.
You have, I mean, it's a new table. It's all of it.
Mhm.
Could Dustin, someone create a SQL package to go ahead and rename that table?
Sure. So the export formats that we have, very similar to import formats, XLSX, CSV, text, but we can also export to a SQL table, and that's kind of what we've been talking about a little bit. It's got the exact same settings as far as customization goes. It includes derived fields. This has been a huge ask from our customers for a long time is, I have this other SQL system, I want to hook it straight up to your tables, and we have to tell them, well, you could do that, but you might have problems with metadata being captured, and you're not going to have any derived fields because a lot of the magic that we have happens at runtime, or it's stored in stored procedures or temp tables that are not accessible from these raw data fields. So export to table, just like the normal bridge, packages all that information up, including the calculated fields, and dumps them to a SQL table that can then be queried by whatever system you want. It's actually in a different database than your CP system of record. So if they blow that database up, all of your data is totally fine. There's very limited risk to anything happening to your database of record. It's faster. The reason it's faster is because we're not rendering these files. So whenever the SQL is done processing, that's it. It builds a table and you're done. That's great to know. Great to know. The captions are sold separately, so they're actually in a separate column. The reason we have it like that, I'm sorry, separate table, not separate column. The reason we have it like that is because we're pushing the back-end table names for the table that contains all of your data, because the captions are editable. So if you change your caption, you don't want to break the link that that table has to whatever system that's using that data. And so you can always join the table and include those captions yourself if you want to with a SQL query. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be included every time, right? So, but it's good because, like, I think maybe we were talking about this yesterday. Like, if you have structured pipe to soil, and then you change it to structure on or PS on, PS off, all of those different permutations, they can change whenever you want, and you don't want to have to remember oh, I have to go update my bridge and update this, all of these other things in order to get this data to continue to flow into whatever thing it needs to flow into. Okay, let's talk a little bit about automation. So this is the slide that I wanted to show yesterday. I showed you the version 1.13 slide. This is 1.14 and 2.0. So all of the scheduling for PCS bridges has been lined up with email notification, and it's totally configurable. And you can understand when it started running, when it's going to run next, and go in and quickly change that to whatever you want. So daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and you can say every second quarter on the third day of the second quarter. If you wanted to do a semi-annual bridge on the third day of that second half of the year or first half of the year, there's whatever options you can dream up, whatever you need, other than what Ray needs, which is less than daily. Sure. So this is bridge imports, bridge exports. Your bridge definitions can both import and export, so you can schedule them, an hour apart. You dump your data out, it goes to another system, it does some stuff, it spits out a file, then an hour later we import that changed data back to PCS. It also works for export to table.
So you could actually schedule the same bridge to run every hour?
Yeah.
Just have 12, just different schedules.
Yeah, you could.
You would effectively have your sub-daily schedule.
Yeah, there's other challenges there though, right? Because if we're talking your database, that's lots of records. And the job service is doing lots of the heavy lifting. But you'll see times where tables are deadlocked. And so you may see performance implications for users. So really the recommendation is that all this stuff happens off hours. It would be the change since the last time that bridge ran. So whatever it thinks it changed. So you may see some duplication. Yeah. It's a really good idea though. It's a good thought.
One thing I did want to bring up, because it has been an item as well, is earlier we were talking about that multiple choice question of does it matter what you have selected when you export data, and we only spoke to the basic bridge. So take that same concept in, and does it matter what you have selected if you do bridge to table, if you're doing it manually? Anybody know? Does it matter if you manually select 5 right-of-ways and then do a export to table manually? And the answer is no. It'll do wholesale. It does the whole database. Similar to what we were talking about earlier with that multiple choice question. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it's not clearly defined in our literature. So it has come up quite a few times on the support side. So just know anytime you do export to table, whether it's scheduled or manual, it's going through the whole database unless you apply filters, like what David spoke about.
Yep. Okay, so really quickly, I have a few use cases I'm going to run through. Likely some of y'all or all of y'all are doing some permutation of these. It's really just a way to kind of get your mind flowing on how you can start integrating PCS data with other systems. So one way that we would see this is maybe around new pipelines where you go out and use an Allegro to create new facilities down the pipeline and you increment them 1, 2, 3, 4, however many you have. Bring the data back into PCS, set your bridge up to dump that data out for GIS system to consume. They figure out the exact footage of where it is, then they push that data back into PCS. So some of the stuff that we talked about, you can do it to file, table, you would export with filters down to that specific row, probably use facility key bridging on the way back, but you can mix and match a lot of this stuff. I'm sure Gina and Ray like that step 3 is GIS magic. Okay, another one that we see is pretty common is tracking work orders in another system. So this process has been made a lot better with the enhancements in 2.0 by facility inspection and facility maintenance ID, facility key bridging. That's a lot of facility in one sentence. So it's the same idea. But this is an automated export, right? So nightly I'm exporting my new maintenance items to this work order management system. Nightly that system is pushing out any changes or any updates so that PCS can consume. And since we're maintaining those hooks at the facility and the record level, I don't have to have matching dates or Intel keys stored across multiple systems. All I'm doing is maintaining those hooks across both systems. That's how you would bridge that in on a daily basis. The last option I have for you is exporting data to be consumed in the dashboard. So we're going to export it through export to table. It'd be faster to just query on it from a SQL perspective. Dashboarding engine is going to take over, and then Casey is going to give a presentation next about what we can do with that data using dashboards. That's